Good afternoon. I'm Neil Bradley, Executive Vice President and Chief Policy Officer at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to today's discussion on immigration, putting communities first. Throughout our nation's history, America's growth and prosperity has been directly tied to the hardworking and talented individuals we welcome to our shores. Being a nation of immigrants isn't just part of America's identity, it's part of America's secret sauce. It's part of the growth engine that has made us the most powerful and prosperous country in the world. But today, our immigration system is broken and in desperate need of repair. And for a long period, the Chamber has talked about both the problems and opportunities around immigration from a national perspective. But in truth, immigration is a local story. It's a personal story. It's the story of families. It's the story of small towns and local communities. It's the stories of industries, of businesses that have been created and grown and prospered and have dominated commerce in various sectors across the world because of the ingenuity of an immigrant and the ability to start a new business here in the land of opportunity. Today, the U.S. Chamber is embarking on a new effort to adjust how we tell the story of immigration and its importance to the United States as a country and to our future prosperity. Today, we're going to hear from business leaders who are going to talk not about the national impact of immigration, they're going to talk about the impact and the opportunity in immigration in their state and in their city. They're going to talk about the impact it has in their industry and the impact it has for families across the country. We hope that this is the start of an important conversation that'll help bring America together to do the long-awaited, long overdue work of fixing our nation's immigration system. To help us kick off this conversation and this initiative, I'm pleased to be joined by Andrew Tisch. Andrew is the co-chairman of the board and the chairman of the executive committee of the Lowe's Corporation. He's an advisor helping us think through these issues at the U.S. Chamber, as he is to countless other educational and civic organizations. Andrew has a passion for immigration, recently completing a book about America's journeys, highlighting the different stories of our fellow Americans who happen to be immigrants themselves. So he's a perfect person to help us kick off this conversation. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you, Neil. I'm pleased to be here.
Well, so I want to get started by picking up on a topic I know that you're well versed in, and frankly, you've educated many of us at the Chamber about, and that is demography. The old saying that demographics is destiny applies very much to nations, and yet the outlook when we think about America's demographic future isn't as bright as it once used to be. And immigration has to be part of that. How should we be thinking about demography and our nation's demographic challenges? And what does it mean for our nation's future?
Well, America's future economic growth depends on a growing and predictable population of working age individuals. We need more working age Americans to support the retirement and healthcare needs of the current Americans who are living longer and in some cases working longer. But if we have fewer working age adults, that means less production and even less innovation, which is the key to economic growth and cannot be automated. But in the United States, the birth rate has been falling for a decade, and at 1.7 births per woman is now well below the replacement rate of 2.1 births. In fact, the total number of births in 2019 was the lowest in 35 years. And the pandemic is likely to cause the number of births to fall further. This means that if we are staring down a future where we may not have enough people to run and grow our economy or to help keep safeguards such as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid in place. When it comes to paying into Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, the denominator is shrinking while the numerator is growing, which will hasten the insolvency of these entitlements. Our politicians have known that we are heading towards this kind of trouble for decades. There's not much government can or should do to change the birth rate. And even if the birth rate did increase, we would not feel the change in the labor force or in total tax revenue for probably 20 years. So what do? You welcome more hardworking immigrants who tend to come here when they are young and work for decades, contributing to the economy and paying taxes.
Yeah, Andrew, we often think about this as a nation, right? But in reality, the population shifts in states and in communities looks different from one place in the country to another place in the country. The birth rates, replacement rates may be a little bit different. You may have situations in which folks are moving out of an area, or they're just not attracting of the immigrants that we bring in. They're not as attracting as many new immigrants. Where are we seeing problems now in terms of population declines, and how can immigration help solve some of those localized areas where parts of the country are already experiencing the negative consequences that you just spoke about?
Well, Neil, the rural counties seem to be the most impacted. From 2010 to 2018, two-thirds of the rural counties lost population, and that has already had real economic consequences. So, according to a recent study, among the 10% of counties with the fastest growing populations during 2010 to 2018, the median growth in the labor force was 5%, and the median income growth was over 24%. Among the 10% of the counties with the largest population losses, median decline in the labor force was 14%, and median income dropped by 1%. For counties in between these two extremes, the growth rate fell as the population growth weakened. Immigrants could stem some of these losses, especially because they are more likely to fill the jobs that Americans don't want but are still deemed essential.
How do you think about, you've built and grown a company, like you understand what it takes to really build an organization on the scale of a company, but you've also thought about it in terms of an economy. Your workers, your employees have been critical to the growth of your companies. In the same way, are immigrants kind of crucial to the nation's economic growth? What do you see in terms of the impact or the driving nature of immigration to our future economic growth? Is it a nice to have, or is it critical?
It's critical. I mean, right now there are 9.3 million unfilled jobs in America. Many employers, from restaurants to resorts to theme parks to farms, are finding it very, very difficult to find workers. At Lowe's, we're having challenges filling open positions in our hotels, in our packaging subsidiaries, and other parts of our companies. The reason Americans aren't taking these jobs is complicated. Some suggest overly generous unemployment benefits. Others suggest problems with families getting childcare or being scared of COVID and not going out. But as a simple fact, it's a simple fact that immigrants will be more willing to take some of these 9 million unfilled jobs. And immigrants will become more important as the workforce in the future. Given America's low birth rates, if we cut off immigration now, we will have 17 million fewer working age adults. Let me repeat that, 17 million fewer working age adults by 2035, according to a study from Blackstone. And that's just the workforce impact. Immigrants are the key drivers of innovation and entrepreneurship that spurs economic growth as well. Immigrants are twice as likely to start a business as native-born Americans, and half of all of America's Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or are led by immigrants or their children. That's why at least one study shows that increasing immigration is going to boost GDP per capita by $2,500 over 30 years, and raise the standard of living for all Americans.
So I got to say, I think you just sent a shudder through the audience with the 17 million person figure.
I hope so.
Yeah, it should. I mean, when at the chamber, when we talk to our members, it really doesn't matter the industry. It really doesn't matter where they're located in the United States. It doesn't even matter the size of the company, from the smallest businesses to America's largest. The number one concern is the inability to fill the open jobs with qualified, skilled individuals. And if you have a reduction of 17 million, I don't know how we operate. So I think the use of the word critical was right here. This is something we have to get right. I want to switch gears a second. I mentioned in the introduction that you wrote a book recently, Journeys: An American Story, and you profiled different individuals and the immigrant experience. Can you tell us a little bit about why you did the book and what you've learned from that, and any lessons that the audience today should take away?
Well, we wrote the book because we felt that the immigrant issue was so complicated and was so important to America, and we saw that there was just no clarity as to what was happening with our immigration policy. But we already have a great magnet for people from abroad. We have our education system. Over 100 of the top 100 universities globally, 60 are in the United States. We have students from all over the world graduating from these top universities. And yeah, I talked earlier about declining birth rates in the United States, but this is a global issue. Birth rates worldwide have declined by about 1% a year every year since 2017. And increasingly, countries will find that attracting and keeping working age people will become more and more competitive. We should do all that we can to entice graduates to stay and become part of the United States. Instead of evicting these students after they graduate and sending them to innovate and create somewhere else, we'd be better off confiscating their passports and providing incentives for them to stay here. So one of the key lessons from Journeys is that immigration has been a contentious issue since our founding in 1776 and well before. There are times in our history when we've been unwelcoming and times when we've been welcoming. But over time, we have been open to immigrants the world over, and we're better off for it. There's probably not a country in the world that is more diverse or more creative than the United States. And maybe it's the diversity that is the reason why we are creative. We all believe this country provides opportunity for anyone willing to seize it. The second we shut our doors, we lose so much of what makes us special.
Yeah, it's such an important message. I think it's one both for our nation, but it's also true in the communities that we grow up in, and in the places that we work. You know, at the chamber, I can tell you, our strength is our diversity and the viewpoints that different people bring, and the backgrounds that they bring to it. I grew up in Oklahoma. It's not one of the most diverse parts of the country, but the diversity and the background of everyone from Native Americans to recent immigrants from Central America really did contribute to the fabric that was our local community. And I have to think it created the dynamism too, that allowed people to kind of be risk takers. You know, the old saying that, you know, the greatest risk taker are really the immigrants. You're leaving home and you're picking up and moving. And if you're willing to take that risk, man, you're probably willing to take lots of other risks to start a business, to do something no one's ever done before.
For sure.
That's exciting. Well, we only have a minute or two left, so I want to give you a chance to give some advice to our audience today. If I think everyone who's tuned in, you know, we may be preaching a little bit, as they used to say, to the choir. But we need more ambassadors. We need more folks talking in their communities about the issues that we're talking about today. Any advice for them on how they can help?
Well, first of all, there's a big choir out there. I know that there's over 1,000 people on this call, and I thank you all for being here. But business has to be the engine of change for America. Our political system is failing us as it seeks to celebrate the extremes and, in many cases, ignores the greater good. And we as American business need to be the leaders to demand better for all of us. I know that reforming our immigration system is hard, and we don't have to fix it all at once, but we could start with what should be a common sense, less controversial reform, like providing a path for citizenship to the so-called dreamers. On average, dreamers came here at the age of 6, and most have known no other life than that they know now and are facing losing here in the United States. If we brought them out of the shadows, we'd be doing right by them and also by and for America. These new Americans would become productive citizens, taxpayers, and revenue producers almost immediately. We also need to lead with local impact. Members of Congress need to hear that a failure to get immigration reform has dramatic, demonstrable consequences for the local business community. It can mean a business moving because they can't find workers. It could mean local schools, municipal budgets, civic organizations failing or hurting, and a declining tax base. So today you're going to hear from business leaders from two very different places, from Wisconsin and Las Vegas, in two very different industries, high tech and amusement parks. While their stories are unique, the conclusions are virtually the same, and the success that each of them has or does not have depends on immigration. We need you to tell the stories in every community and in every industry. This is the effort that I'm working on with the United States Chamber, and I cannot implore you enough to join in and tell the story. Your voices and your expertise are absolutely needed. I thank you very much for being here. I thank you very much for what you're going to do. And Neil, thank you for doing this.
Well, Andrew, thank you, and thank you for your leadership. And I'm excited to hear some of these stories. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Tom Wickham, who's going to bring us two experts from Wisconsin and Las Vegas. And we're going to find out what immigration means in their communities. So, Andrew, thanks so much. Tom, over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neil and Andrew, for that informative conversation. We're continuing this conversation with a look at immigration's impact in state and local economies across the country. We've invited two chamber CEOs who understand the importance of immigration to every level of the workforce in their respective areas. Please welcome Kurt Bauer, President and CEO of Wisconsin's Manufacturers and Commerce, and Mary Beth Seawald, President and CEO of the Las Vegas Metro Chamber of Commerce. Let's jump right into the discussion. Kurt and Mary Beth, the first question is for both of you. As leaders of chambers of commerce, describe the workforce situation in your respective area of the country. What are you hearing from your members with respect to unmet workforce needs? And where is immigration most critical to helping the economy?
Mary Beth, you want to go first?
Well, certainly. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And first, I want to thank you, Wick. Thank you to the U.S. Chamber for having this really important conversation and for inviting the Vegas Chamber. We're really thrilled to be here to participate. You know, Neil just said this, but it's worth repeating. This country has been built by immigrants searching for the American dream. And, you know, you think about Italians, Irish, Hispanic, and German. My own father's family came from Germany, and my dad started a small grocery store to put food on the many of the tables of the families who couldn't pay. So I can tell you firsthand that immigrants are the foundation of this country. And here at home in Las Vegas, immigrant workers play a critical role in the economy, especially in the areas of tourism, of course, as you know, is very important to us in Las Vegas and the leisure sector, along with construction as well. And so in our community, you see a lot of immigrant workers looking for jobs in the tourism industry because historically they were extremely good, well-paying jobs, and they're relatively easy to get, especially now. So this is a little bit different compared with other states or metro areas where hospitality jobs usually pay quite a bit less than they do in Las Vegas. You also see immigrant workers in the construction industry quite a bit. Again, these are very well-paying jobs. For decades, immigrant workers within the residential and commercial construction industries have been a major driver in our local economy. So Vegas really continues, as we continue to recover and diversify our economy, it's going to be more and more important for us to attract the skilled workers to come to our region. And because there's such a dire need for this in Las Vegas, the Vegas Chamber partnered with our local Las Vegas Workforce Connections Board to create what is something really important I think you're all going to want to hear about. It's an employment hub, which is the first in the nation to be inside chamber offices. But we've also formed a workforce task force that's made up of leading and emerging, I should say, industry sectors. But what we've done that's so unique is this hub serves legal immigrants and refugees who are looking for work, so that our business hub at the Vegas Chamber connects our members directly to immigrants. So this is potentially a model for the entire country, and it relates to workforce development in such a major way. So that's something that we're really looking to improve on and progress with as it relates to immigration policy in Las Vegas and Nevada.
And Tom, in Wisconsin, workforce is our #1 economic challenge. It was pre-COVID. It certainly is today, and it will be post-COVID. In fact, the demographics in Wisconsin are such that we're going to have a workforce challenge through mid-century and beyond. We're just not at replacement birth rates. We've had more people leaving the state through out-migration than in-migration. That's pretty typical of what you're seeing in the Midwest. Mary Beth has maybe been one of the benefactors. A lot of folks are leaving the Midwest for warmer climates. And so from our perspective at WMC, as we've analyzed this, and I've been here for 10 years, and workforce has been a problem even when our unemployment rate was relatively high, we see immigration as being an absolute critical economic driver in the future. Very similar to the rest of the country, of course. Immigrants started coming to Wisconsin in droves starting in the 1840s. Germans and Norwegians. My grandparents came here from Germany to work in factories in Milwaukee and emigrated their way to Beloit, Wisconsin. And that we're going to have to look to the past in order to solve the problems of the future. If we don't have immigration reform, our economy will suffer because we just don't have the people for the jobs going forward, and it's going to be critical to our economy in order to get some sort of help from Washington. This is one of those issues where we can't do it alone. We had a talent attraction campaign to try and draw people in from other states, but the reality is that we need the federal government's help in order to draw people in from other countries.
Mary Beth, Las Vegas is experiencing these shortages against the backdrop of a tourism boom. How are local businesses impacted?
Well, we've had a major impact on the Las Vegas economy, and the Vegas Chamber believes immigration reform is absolutely vital to our economic recovery. And Vegas, like other cities, we're facing a worker shortage just like everybody else, especially in the service industries like restaurants. We have members who can't increase their capacity back to pre-COVID levels because they just don't have enough workers to accommodate the recovery boom. One local restaurant in Las Vegas is a Thai restaurant, Lotus of Siam. They had to close one of their 2 restaurants because they just can't find the workers to handle the increased demand. So, and they're one of hundreds of stories. So their revenue's cut in half, not to mention the bad PR that a company gets when they're closed and they can't serve any patrons. So you're seeing longer wait times at restaurants for hotel rooms to be cleaned, for the next guest checking in. Of course, there's a huge lack of Uber and Lyft drivers, and this all impacts Las Vegas's tourism-based economy. So another very important aspect of the problem is the real estate log jams. as builders are trying to find workers, it's unprecedented. I heard a radio commercial just yesterday from builders offering signing bonuses, immediate benefits, vacation immediately, along with promises of promotions and upward mobility. So it really doesn't matter what sector you're in. I think the shortage of workers in every industry and every skill set level, and every size of business, it's affecting all of us. So immigration reform could help fill these gaps, not just in hospitality and construction, but also in healthcare and a lot of other industries as well.
Kurt, how are these shortages disrupting Wisconsin's economy?
Very similar to Mary Beth, we're also a tourism state. We're in peak tourism season right now, and many of our prime destinations just don't have enough workers. For example, the Wisconsin Dells, which is the water park capital of the world, it really caters to people from Illinois, the Chicagoland area, other parts of the Midwest. They normally get about 5,000 student visas for people to come over here and work. They were only able to get about 1,600. And that's really having the type of disruption that Mary Beth talked about. Many restaurants aren't able to provide the customer service experience that they would prefer. They've had to limit their menu. They've had to limit their hours. Sometimes they're closed. And of course, this compounds the fact that, last summer was COVID related with all the restrictions, and many of these restaurants were closed. So this was an opportunity for them to rebound and hopefully recoup some of the losses that they incurred last year, and they're not able to do it because they can't find workers. So it's critically important to our tourism economy, but we have a lot of immigrants that work in manufacturing and agriculture in particular. We're the dairy state, and we really right now have that dairy workforce is dominant by immigrant labor. And so that's another aspect of our economy that is being hit hard by the fact that we need this immigration reform.
It's not just about workforce levels. There's a strong legacy of immigrant entrepreneurship and innovation in both of your areas. Can you paint a picture for us of the importance of immigration to entrepreneurship where you live and work?
Well, in Wisconsin, we've got a great legacy on that. If you look at some of our signature companies, Briggs & Stratton, A.O. Smith, Harley Davidson, and then just recently we had a major pharmaceutical company move to Wisconsin that's run by an immigrant who founded the company. So there's lots of different examples of people coming to our state and creating, innovating and creating a new enterprise that is creating wealth and opportunity for not just immigrants, but born and raised Wisconsinites. So we have a very proud heritage of immigrant entrepreneurship in the state of Wisconsin.
And Kurt, I would agree with you. Absolutely. Immigrant entrepreneurship has always been a strong driver of small business in the Las Vegas community. Research actually has shown that U.S. immigrants are almost twice as likely to become entrepreneurs compared with native-born U.S. citizens. And we have a chamber member named Penny Chatima who owns a restaurant, Lotus of Siam. Her parents came from Thailand with a dream. They started Lotus of Siam 22 years ago in Las Vegas. They started with one 3,000-foot building. Now they have two 15,000 square feet, and they employ almost 100 people, but they just can't get anybody to work. Penny tells me that she had a 4-day job fair and not one single person came to even apply for the jobs. But, this is an example of a company that gives back to the community. They donate supplies to schools. They donate to the homeless. And this is just one example of hundreds and thousands where people just want a chance to pursue their dreams. But they really should have a clear and fair process to come to this country legally.
Kurt and Mary Beth, what immigration policy reforms would most help your areas grow the local economy? What do you need to stay competitive?
Well, I'd like to see some sort of guest worker program. Honestly, I'd like a bipartisan comprehensive deal. If that's not possible, a guest worker program. I think you could start from our perspective with lifting the arbitrary cap on H-1B visas. As Neil was interviewing the other gentleman, I apologize, I don't remember his name, but he made a comment that I've said many times. Wisconsin has great public and private universities and colleges. We draw in people from all around the world, the best and brightest, and many of them want to stay here and apply their trade. And instead, we don't give them a visa. We kick them back to wherever they came from and tell them to compete against us. It doesn't make any sense at all. And that would be maybe the first place to start. Another area would be to adopt a guest worker program similar to what Canada and Mexico have, where not every state in the United States has a workforce shortage. I think most do, but maybe some don't. We certainly do. So people who want to come to the United States and work, we should be able to tell them where they're going to work and in what sector of the economy for what length of time. That would certainly benefit Wisconsin, because it's one thing to have people come to the United States. It's another thing to have them come to Wisconsin where they're desperately needed.
Yeah, and I would agree with Kurt again. There have been a lot of conversations at the federal level over the years and attempts by Congress, but there hasn't really been much federal legislative movement in recent years. And, I think Congress needs to move forward with a comprehensive legislative plan. It's part of our economic infrastructure, and lawmakers need to focus on the policies, not the politics. I would say from our standpoint in Las Vegas, there are probably three main things that we need to do. We need to modernize and reform the immigration system and really give folks a clear, cohesive, and fair process for those who want, like I said earlier, want to come to this country legally. We need to create an employment eligibility verification system that's efficient, that's accurate, and that is manageable. And I think the last thing we would say at the Vegas Chamber is we need to establish that temporary guest worker program. I think Kurt was alluding to that, and that would include the screening of foreign workers as well.
Thank you so much. That's all the time we have for this discussion. Kurt and Mary Beth, thank you for sharing your valuable perspective with us. And thank you so much for your leadership on this issue. We're glad that you've joined us today. Thanks again.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mary Beth.
Thanks so much, Kurt and Tom.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kenny Nguyen, and I'm the CEO of 368, and I am also a member of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Small Business Council. And as we have heard from Lowe's chairman, Andrew Tisch, and the chamber leadership, immigration plays a critical role in driving our economy forward. It is a vital part of our business and economic engine, and for many companies, it is essential to their growth and job creation. I'd like to welcome our next speakers to the stage to share their perspectives on how immigration plays a critical role in their businesses and industry, and discuss what we can do to support better policy. So I would like to welcome to the virtual stage Linda Moore, President and CEO of TechNet, and then Denise Bexon, Vice President in Human Resources and Government Relations of Morey's Piers and Beachfront Water Park. And so I'm going to ask a couple questions here, y'all. I'll tee up the first one here. Look, from my perspective, as a child of immigrants and the husband of an immigrant, I live with these impacts of immigration reform like every single day. But in terms of value add to my business, the people that immigrated to our country and come in, their diverse perspective is incredible, especially being in the marketing and advertising business. It's super valuable to have people with different views than yours. It could challenge perspective. But I'd like to begin by asking you both to share a little bit about the impact of immigration on your operations, specifically with you, Denise, first for the company, and then Linda, you next for what it is like to for TechNet's members. So Denise, the floor is yours. I think you might be muted, but I love the energy that you're coming in with.
Thank you.
Let's bring it on.
All right. Thank you, Kenny. It's great to be here this afternoon. I can't believe I'm still forgetting to unmute after a year and a half of this, but some things I guess won't change. We are a small amusement company, a family-owned amusement company in Wildwood, New Jersey. We have 3 piers, 2 water parks, 5 restaurants, and 4 or 5 hotels. And so we are a place that really ramps up in the summer, and in the wintertime, the stoplights are off, and there's maybe one place if I want to go out to lunch. So very, very different atmosphere. The barriers to immigration have a direct impact on our business. We rely on nearly 500 guest workers each summer to fully staff our business. We're in that resort community. There's no Target, no Trader Joe's. The nearest mall is an hour away. And our local high school graduates about 50 kids a year. So I could hire all of them, their siblings, their parents, and still not get to the 1,500 that we need to fully staff and to fill our roster. We need strong guest worker programs, J1, H2B, et cetera, to operate our rides, our games, our water parks. And it's true for our business, other businesses in our geographic region, but also my colleagues in the attractions and parks industry around the country, from Wildwood to, we were just listening to the Wisconsin Dells, to Myrtle Beach to Maine's coast. So this problem is not limited to certain regions, but to businesses that are seasonally based for sure. Right now, I'm in the midst of discussions with our leadership on how we're going to operate until Labor Day, with U.S. employees going back to school and going to sports camps, football camp, et cetera, in the coming weeks. And without the typical number of summer work travel students that we hire, we're anticipating needing to adjust our schedule and our operating time, and hope possibly anticipating a 30% revenue hit in August as a result, which is just devastating because that's our biggest month of our shortest operating season. Hosting these international students allows us to offer a full service to our guests and to remain competitive regionally with other resort areas. And in turn, it allows us to fully recognize our revenue potential. And that allows us to employ more full-time, year-round American employees, and to have a robust capital reinvestment plan, and to continue to expand and grow, and to contribute to our community more fully. Additionally, as we deal with labor shortages and potentially cut our hours or offerings, that has an impact on attendance at the surrounding businesses. And it has upstream effects on our suppliers and vendors. Our staffing shortages disrupt the supply chain as we decrease our hours or offerings. Our needs for goods and services decrease as well. The economic benefit of these guest worker programs is vast. There's direct and indirect impacts, and the employees are living in our community. They're spending their earnings in our community on accommodation, entertainment, goods, and services, and they're helping our community to thrive in the summer months so that we have enough nuts squirreled away to get through our off season where we're not, taking in any revenue and we're closed. So it really has a major, major impact.
Thank you for sharing, Denise. And Linda, would love to hear your thoughts about what the members think of TechNet.
Thanks, Kenny, for the question. Just a little bit about TechNet. We represent 85 tech companies all across the U.S. Many of them are in Silicon Valley, but we also have some scattered across the country, especially in tech hubs like Austin and Boston and Chicago. H-1B visas, high-skilled visas, and also lifting the green card caps. Those are things that would help all of our member companies. If there's one thing that unifies all of the companies within TechNet, it is the need for immigration reform. And we have all kinds of companies within the tech ecosystem. We have everything from hardware to software to internet platforms to venture capital to fintech. We represent the entire ecosystem. And one thing that we all agree on is that we want America to remain the technological leader of the world. And we didn't become the leader of the world in technology by accident. There were policies put in place to make that happen. There are people who are still very active in TechNet who remember when Boston was the center of technology in the US, and it is still a very important hub. But as we know, Silicon Valley took over the lead role when there was intentional policies put in place with government investment, private partnership with Stanford and other businesses, and then also a change in our immigration policy. And those very things that were put in place to make America the technological leader that it is today are in danger of letting us lose that role. We slip every year in the innovation index worldwide, and immigration is a huge part of job creation. As even the previous panel talked about, immigrants are twice as likely as native-born Americans to start a business. When you look at the Fortune 500, 43% of the leaders of Fortune 500 companies are immigrants or the children of immigrants. When you look at the top 35 of the Fortune 500, that goes up to 57% are immigrants or the children of immigrants. And one thing that we focus on a lot at TechNet as well is changing the American talent pipeline. That is a multi-decade process, though. We are just not graduating enough college students to take these trained jobs that are open all across America. We definitely focus on the need to increase STEM education and computer science education, and we are very active in winning those challenges at the state level and at the national level to identify and train and certify and increase the number of computer science and STEM education teachers. That's very important. But there are 2.5 million job openings across America now that we just don't have the talented, skilled individuals to take those jobs. And we cannot possibly train our American workforce fast enough to take advantage of those openings and to take those jobs. So it's that combination of a homegrown talent pipeline plus immigration that has gotten us where we are today and is what we need to keep us on top today. We're in a global race for talent. No one else is slowing down. They are putting policies in place that are making it easier for immigrants to come and to grow their businesses and to create jobs in their countries. And we definitely don't want America going in the opposite direction.
Amen to that. And that's so great to hear both of y'all's perspectives and how important immigration reform is. And the statistic that you shared, I believe it's like no less than, is it 43% of Fortune 500 companies are founded or co-founded by an immigrant or a child of an immigrant?
Yes.
And that figure rises to 57%. I wrote this down because it was like mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Among the Fortune 500 top 35.
That's quite something.
Yeah, that's quite something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's go down to the chamber conversation now. And this is a question for both of y'all here, is that how can chambers be helpful to their local businesses in supporting the push for better immigration policy? And Denise, we'll start with you, then Linda, you can take us home.
We're very fortunate here at Maurice Pierce to work with the Cape May County Chamber and their leader, Vicki Clark. I think chambers are vital in supporting and leading the push for better immigration policy. They speak for the community, they speak collectively for the businesses they represent, and chambers are in the unique position to be able to share the impact of these policies and the need for reform without sounding self-serving. I think it's important for chambers to identify key stakeholders in their community and regularly engage with them. Stay informed of the issues and use those people who are the experts in the field to help educate and inform the community at large. And they play a vital role connecting all these pieces.
Agreed. Very much a vital role. What about you, Linda? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with everything Denise said. The chambers have such an important role to play. You really represent your communities and you represent all businesses and workers, and you need to be in touch with your policymakers. Do your homework. Look at the ones who already support immigration reform and also the ones who don't. Don't give up on the ones who have made statements that say that they're not going to support it. Definitely talk to them anyway. And especially important are those that seem to be on the fence or can go either way. Definitely engage with your policymakers and build support from the ground up. And that's where the chambers really come in. And also, I just want to say, technology underpins every single sector now. It is so important to every single part of our economy. And one thing in particular that you can talk about as you really drive home the need to have high-skilled workers is the vast number of people that we need in the U.S. to really help protect us against cyber attacks. Cyber attacks are on the rise. And the one thing that I hear from all of our CEOs, from all of our companies, and also from others in other industries as well, is the lack of skilled talent in the cybersecurity warfare area. We really need to protect all of our companies, but also our critical infrastructure from cyber attacks. And I would just add that to one of the things that you really drive home when you talk about the need to really increase immigration and to get the high skilled workers that we need today.
Yeah, innovation is very important. And with cyber attacks, with SolarWinds recently and the July 4th cyber attack, I mean, these are very timely conversations. But yeah, let's go ahead and wrap. Thank y'all so much for sharing your perspectives and also the importance of having your conversations with the chambers here. Like those local chambers are a force to drive change. So thank you so much, Linda. Thank you so much, Denise, for joining us today. I'll kick it back over to the rest of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce team for the next part of the show.
Thank you, Kenny.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Well, Kenny, thank you so much. Linda, Denise, that was a great conversation. When Andrew kicked us off earlier, he said we were going to hear people with very different stories. Literally, we just heard from water parks and technology fighting ransomware, but yet the stories were different. The conclusion was the same, that immigration is just fundamentally key to helping reach the potential for these companies and for these communities. So we're in our Q&A session now. Thank you to those who've put questions into the chat. We're going to try to get to as many questions as we possibly can. I'm rejoined by Tom Wickham, who heads up state and local policy for us here at the U.S. Chamber, and John Baselisi, who is our resident expert on all things immigration and has helped organize our advocacy efforts around immigration reform. So the first question actually is to you, John. What is the Chamber doing to advance immigration reform?
Thank you, Neil. The Chamber is doing an awful lot to advance immigration reform here in the United States. We are talking to everyone that we can talk to on Capitol Hill to raise the level of importance, because this is one of those things where, and you saw it on today's panel, whether you're talking about agricultural workers, you're talking about high-tech workers, you're talking about the people that are working at the amusement parks, landscape firms, forestry, you name it. All of these industries, while they may be disparate in their interests on other issues, when it comes to immigration reform, they all clearly need the ability to access talent from abroad. They can find some of their labor needs here in certain industries, but there are other needs that they just go unmet. And if we cannot make that happen, we're going to have all the types of disruptions that you heard from the panelists today. You see that in various other industries as well. In addition to our Hill efforts, we're doing a lot in working with the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Labor, as they have unique roles in operating the United States immigration system. So whether it comes to trying to have more certainty with regard to processing labor certifications at DOL, or if it's trying to help DHS get through its immense backlogs that are gumming up the works for many companies because they have timely petitions, but they're just not being adjudicated in time because for various and sundry reasons. But I would note that the COVID pandemic definitely threw U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services for a loop last year. And also with the State Department. About 2 of every 3 consulates is either partially or completely closed still. And that is very troubling for a lot of companies that have critical talent abroad that they need to bring here, whether it's to ink a business deal or to launch a medical innovation, effort, or it's to bring critical plant operators to ensure that, we want to get a new automotive plant up and running, but we need these individuals here to make sure the equipment is going to run right when we open up the doors. So all those things, it holds back economic activity. It holds back the creation of jobs for American workers. So there's a lot we need to do. It's a buffet, and they just keep bringing more food. We got a lot of things to do. We're going to keep at it.
You know, John, I'm reminded when President Reagan, early in his presidency, had one of his major initiatives that was stalled in Congress. Kind of like immigration reform has been stalled. Reagan was asked a similar question: how are we going to get this done? And he famously replied, we're going to try to make them see the light, referring to our nation's lawmakers. But if we can't make them see the light, we're going to make them feel the heat. And, you know, I think we're at that point in this discussion on immigration. We want folks to see the light, but we're willing to apply the heat. And that's so much of what Tom's working on, as well as we talk about how to really put this in a local context. You know, it's easy to say that immigration is someone else's problem and it affects other people. When we talk about, as Tom did with Kurt and Mary Beth, how it impacts your local constituents, well, it's pretty hard to then blame inaction on someone else. Let's flip to our next question. And Tom, you can jump in here, and John may want to as well. Andrew mentioned that the U.S. Needs workers in the rural and agriculture space. If we support immigrants entering this country to fill these jobs, how do we attract those type of people into the United States? Any thoughts?
Tom, do you want to take this or do you want me to go?
I just think it's underscoring what Kurt and Mary Beth talked about and making voices heard. And there is such a tendency to focus all the attention on Washington when the impact in the agriculture sector and in small towns and in metro areas is so profound. And getting the industry leaders in these agricultural fields with their stories to tell. They are the experts. They are the ones that can show us the ways to attract the kind of workers that they need, and providing the connection between those entities and our policymakers is really an important focus and something we're working very hard on at the Chamber.
So let's do a little speed round here. I'm going to combine a couple of the questions with the time we have left. Immigration's been an issue for some time. Why is it going to be any different? And is there any chance that we achieve what Kurt talked about in his conversation with Tom of making it bipartisan? John, you've had some success here. Tell us why we should be hopeful.
Neil, hope always springs eternal. I think.
Oh, now come on, give us the reasons for hope.
I'm getting there. To me, it's a matter of, working on immigration reform for the past 10 years of my life. These the developments accumulate, and you start to see how when I first got up here, dealing with guest worker issues. If you had told me 8 years ago what was the toughest issue you were going to deal with when it came to trying to negotiate between Republicans and Democrats, I would have said on H-2Bs. And the reason is because you're dealing with folks that are not college educated, they are seasonal workers, and there's all sorts of political pitfalls on both sides of the aisle. You look at how H-2B issues have been addressed over the past 5-6 years. You've seen a significant amount of Democrats and Republicans coming together to provide cap relief for H-2B employers, to prevent some of the worst elements of a H-2B regulation that was issued in 2015 from coming together and being implemented. And the reason is why we want to ensure that the program operates as well as it can in the current circumstances, because folks like Denise at Maurice Piers and many landscapers, many forestry companies, a lot of seafood processors, among others that I'm missing right now, but they all need their seasonal workers. And the fact that you could find a bipartisan a group, there are so many House members, and you're thinking of people like Shelley Pingree, and then you have Andy Harris, which are on like two different spectrums of the political spectrum here in DC. But on this issue, they can come together. You see it with the Farm Workforce Modernization Act that, talking about agriculture. You see a connection between Republicans and Democrats saying, listen, we really need these workers, not just for, your normal production in agriculture, whether you talk about tree nuts or citrus or apples, but dairy. I mean, dairy is one of those things where people don't know this, but it's not seasonal. There's no cow milking season. And because of that, they don't get access to H2A. So if you look at the dairies across the country, they have it probably the worst in terms of all agriculture. So that's another thing where you see these connections on issues. You also see, Andrew Tisch talked about this with regard to Dreamers. You see bipartisan support consistently in polling that we need to do something to protect the Dreamers. The Chamber's been very out front with this. We're going to continue to be out front with this, but when you see all of these elements come together, will it be a comprehensive package that addresses every issue under the sun? Maybe, maybe not. But you can see the how bipartisan negotiations can come together, and you could put things together and get things done.
Yeah, John, I'm reminded of how that H-2B cap relief came together, and about a decade ago in Congress, and how it's coming together now. It didn't come together because one morning, someone from the coast of Maryland and someone from rural parts of the heartland woke up and said, gosh, we should work together. Let's find something to do. It occurred because seafood processors in Maryland couldn't fill their orders and they were losing business, and they went to their senator and they told Barbara Mikulski about the problems that they had and why they needed relief. And at the same time, rural nurseries were talking about why they couldn't get their plants into market and meet the demand because they didn't have workers. And turned out the solution for both of them was the same. But you know what? If those seafood processors, if those business leaders in the rural heartland hadn't talked to their senator, that never would have happened. I think that's the importance that we're trying to drive in today's conversation. If we're not talking about the local impact of immigration, we're leaving our best advocacy tools to solve this problem out in the cold, and we can't afford to be without our best tools. Okay, let's get to one more question before we go. John, lightning round again. Can we use EB5 to build our economy?
Of course we can. We have to. It's one of those things where it is a valuable financing tool for various development projects, whether it's building real estate in urban contexts, whether it's been used for the Port of Baltimore. It's been used for building highway interchanges in Southeast Pennsylvania. It's also been used to build charter schools in Arizona and senior centers out in Florida. There's a lot of ways that EB5 has been used. We're in the unfortunate position of having the EB5 Regional Center program lapse. We are hard at work trying to push congressional leadership to understand the program has to come back. It is going to be a key tool to get the economy back up and running. There's going to be a moment, I would think, in the next few months that we're going to be able to get EB5 back up and running.
All right. Your lips to Congress's ears and the president's desk. I want to thank Tom and John for joining us for the Q&A. I apologize to those of you who had questions we didn't get to, but we're here. Reach out to us. Let us know how we can be helpful. We promised at the start of the hour that we were going to hear from various parts of the country, from various industries with different stories. We went to Wisconsin. We went to Las Vegas. We went to Silicon Valley and to the Jersey Shore. And the experiences were a little different, but the conclusion was the same, that for these local communities, for these business leaders and industries, immigration has to be part of the solution for our future economic growth. Andrew kicked us off by talking about what everyone tuned in today can do. And it really is developing your story about how immigration impacts your community, why your company, why your industry can prosper as a result of immigration, and telling it. And at the U.S. Chamber, we're here to help do that. We look forward to working together with all of you to tell the story of immigration, to tell about the potential and opportunity it has as we seek to make this next century the next great American century. And so we appreciate your taking the time to join us today. And we so very much look forward to working with you to turn immigration reform from a talking point to a reality. Thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.